Hello and welcome to episode number 3 of the Free Your Mind podcast. So today I want to talk to you about the principle of thought or thinking. Now, I first become aware of this about 7-8 years ago. I initially come across it because, well, I don't know about you, and I don't know if you're in business. I don't know where you are kind of in your life, but I know that a lot of the people that listen and all of my clients are people that are in business. When I didn't set out to be a businessman, I didn't even know it was a possibility. You know, I think I already mentioned this anyway, but the reason I went to uni and all of that stuff, even though I hated it, and even though I didn't seem to give as much of a shit about studying, and I got through it without reading books or anything. I basically just hacked my way through it. I did the minimum amount that I could in order to get a good enough grade. You know, I would spend my time playing FIFA, playing football, going out, just enjoying life. And then, 2 days before, I would pull together some journal articles and write some bullshit that would be enough to pass. There was one time that I got 80% in a biomechanics exam, and it counted as 50% of my overall grade. So me being me knew that meant I didn't have to ever go back and I would pass. So I never went back to biomechanics ever again. That was that done. But it was basically, I just didn't know there was any other choice. I didn't know there was any other possibility. It was only when I come out of uni, realised I'd been sold an absolute fat bastard of a lie. Suddenly I found myself with no money, more debt, student debt, and no one was giving jobs. I spoke about this already, but essentially I went into personal training because the advert guaranteed me a job, and of which they didn't actually follow through. So that was awesome. However, I then found myself saying, well, fuck this. I'm going to create my own job. I'm going to create my own. And before I knew it, I was self-employed. I was running a business, and quickly that business started to make money. I started to have clients and accounts and admin and systems, and before long I then had, I'm running ads and I'm doing marketing and I'm learning all of this stuff. I've got, a PA working for me at this point, a salesperson. Suddenly I'm starting to have trainers working under me. I didn't set out to do that. And to be honest, I didn't have a fucking clue what I was doing. No clue. And I was under the illusion at that point that other people knew something that I didn't know. And therefore, I needed to go and learn from them. Get a mentor is all the kind of rage all over social. And I'm not saying that that's not a good way of doing things, but I think I would probably change that sentence to get a good mentor. Because unfortunately for me, I spent a lot of time. The learning curve is huge in business. If you've been in business for any number of years, and the amount of mistakes and ups and downs and costly mistakes and opportunities missed, and maybe that's just the nature of the game, and I think it probably is. But anyway, I was very much sold into the idea that I needed mentors, and I would spend thousands and thousands and thousands. What I didn't know is there'd be a lot of people faking it, a lot of people, the blind leading the blind. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. That was definitely my experience. I was young, I was naive, I had no idea what I was doing, I was vulnerable, I was shitting my pants, I was stressed, I felt the pressure of supporting my family, and people were coming along with all the right words, the NLP tactics, the strategies that make you reach for your wallet and hope. You sold the dream, they're tapped into your pain, you're like, fuck, I'm going to be a millionaire tomorrow, make £1 million in one day, just by coming to this seminar. Which is all fascinating. But anyway, when you enter these things, occasionally you found something good. And often the things I found weren't the things I was even really looking for. And this particular event I went to, I learned something that it was a technique that essentially, it's a similar technique. I've created my own version of this, maybe I'll link that in the show notes or whatever. But you thought of the thing that was causing you the most stress. And using this technique, you then 2 seconds later, 30 seconds later, more realistically, the stress had reduced. Or you couldn't even remember what the thing was. And that for me at the time was mind-blowing, because it was the first time that my mind had looked in the direction of maybe my thinking wasn't quite as reliable as I thought it was. If my stress is reduced, you may have experienced this if you meditate. If you meditate, you go into the meditation feeling stressed, you come out of it feeling less stressed, yet nothing has changed. If you've used my, it's like my own variation of 6-second box breathing, but I have my own little spin on it. It does the same thing. If you've watched my video, done it with me, done it on your own, but you're watching the video, then you'll know you can take your stress from a 10 down to like a 4, yet the outside world has not changed. And this was the first time that something had pointed me in the direction of, fuck, maybe my thinking isn't what it seems. Maybe the world isn't what it seems. And that really set me on this path. Because, you know, as you've come to understand probably up until this point, I had a lot going on in my head, a lot of demons and conflicts, and constantly questioning myself and looking to others for answers because I didn't know, and, you know, hidden insecurities and hidden fears and pains, and, you know, running towards success and money and recognition and praise and social media following, and without really knowing why, without really knowing what was making me tick, without really knowing what was making me so hell-bent on becoming something or somebody, as you know, or becoming better or being successful, you know, and at the same time not understanding why, you know, some days I was up and down, some days I was really snappy and aggy with the people that I loved. You know, why do I keep being like this with Jenna, or why do I keep being like this with the kids, or, you know, why did I lose my temper in traffic? I've made myself look like a dick, and that's just not really who I want to be. You know, there was so much going on for me that this really just kind of opened the door to, oh, wow, like maybe my thinking isn't always true. From this point, I listened to Byron Katie, Loving What Is. Now, if you, some people just cannot get on board with that book, and that's totally cool. Everyone has their own kind of flavour and preferences. But for me, looking to what she was actually saying, the idea is you start to question your thoughts. And using simple questions, you start to question your thinking. When you go, oh, you know, I'm going to turn all my ads off in December because no one's really spending any money. And then you go, but is that true? And you're like, well, it kind of makes sense. Well, can you be certain that it's true? Well, no, I can't be certain. How do I feel when I think the thought? Well, I feel like, oh, for fuck's sake, you know, I'm going to struggle this month, and or whatever I would have been thinking at the time. Who knows, you know? And who would you be without the thought? Well, I would just carry on doing what I'm doing. And interestingly, the reason I use that as an example is because December as a PT was always my best month every single year, because whilst everyone else was listening to their thinking that people weren't spending money, I was still driving my advertising, and it was cheaper for me sometimes because basically the competition had dropped, and I'd be getting people signing up in December. And that's just one example of how thinking can, you know, thinking changes our feelings, and our feelings change our actions, and our actions change our results, and then our results usually confirm that our thinking was correct. But suddenly you start looking at, wow, like if I was wrong there, where else am I wrong? You know, and the same can be true for, you know, this person annoys me because of this, or this person said this to me because of this, or, you know, I am stressed because of money, or, you know, when I get to this amount of money, or when I have this house, or when I have this body, or when I have this wife, or if only this happened. So much fucking thinking going on, and we just blindly believe our thinking like it's true. We just believe that all of our thoughts are completely true. So this was the first time I started to go, wow, actually, that's fascinating, because so often I've been wrong. I'll tell you a story. When I was training to be a PT, I can't believe I'm sharing this, but, you know, I'm definitely an oversharer, so you would just get used to that. Our conversations will talk about sex and drugs and money and all sorts of shit, the universe and soul and, you know. But when I was training to be a PT, which is a fucking total waste of money and time, but do you know what? That's fine. Jenna and I were trying for a baby. I didn't really want to, but I knew that this is what she was absolutely focused on and infatuated with. And to be honest, I didn't want to lose her. So it was just a case of keep her happy, keep her happy. Even though I had these big grandiose dreams of having all this money and traveling the world together, and I knew that having a child would put a lot of pressure on. I already had one from a previous relationship anyway, and I know that had been very troubling for me and difficult and put financial pressure on. And so I'd come to a point where I'd said yes, let's not have kids. Sorry, what the hell was going on here? I come to a point where I was like, let's have kids. And then as I was sat there, disengaged in this boring PT course, because again, I was overqualified to even be in the room, but as always, someone at the top decides that you have to have a particular qualification, even though it's less than degree level, and even though it makes no logical sense, but because that's what the world dictates, you just have to comply with the rules sometimes. Completely disengaged, I was barely paying attention and still passing because I'd done it at degree level. So it was, and plus I loved it. I did enjoy it. Anyway, as I'm sat there disengaged from it, looking out the window, it was like a nice hot sunny day, and here I am in this full-time course, learning stuff that's like basics. I'd studied it at college actually, so it was like 4 years ago work that I was looking at. And deep in thought and thinking through all of what kids is all the impact is gonna have, and all the impact it's gonna have financially, and all of that. I text Jenna and said, "I've changed my mind. Like, I just don't want to have kids. I don't think I ever want to have kids or more kids. I just don't think that's something I want. I hate the idea of it. I don't enjoy it really being a dad at that point anyway, and I just don't think I want it." And she texted back and said, "I'm pregnant." Top marks for me. So that was cool. And I wasn't happy. And if I'm honest, I resented her, even though really I wasn't aware enough to know that, take some responsibility for my own choices and actions there. But I resented her for it. I resented her for making me do something I didn't really want to do. And I wasn't supportive during the pregnancy. I was a complete cock, actually. And when I say cock, I'm being hard on myself. Was I there? Was I supportive? Was I working my arse off to make sure we had money? Yeah, but was I emotionally there? Did I ask her, how are you? Did I support her in the best way that I could? Absolutely not. I was just a selfish bastard that basically was just thinking of myself at that time. I was young. Oops. I was sorry about that. I was young. And to get to my point, as soon as Max was born, it changed. Something changed. And after years of telling myself that I didn't enjoy being a dad, I didn't enjoy the pressure, I didn't enjoy what I considered to be judgment, because I had my first child at 16. He was born when I was 17. And the judgment around that and the ridicule, and, I kind of was so desperate not to be known as, someone from a council estate that had kids as a teen, that in many ways I was rejecting who I was and hiding part kind of my past. I didn't want people to know, and it's crazy to think back now. It's like, what the hell? But I didn't know. Fast forwarding, my oldest son is 13. Max is now 8. Rosie is 4, nearly 5. And I love it. Being a dad is one of the greatest joys that I've ever been blessed with. I love watching them grow and develop, each in their right. They're all unique. My oldest son is he's into like guns and tanks and gaming, and my second son is into sport and football and FIFA, and plays a good level of football, and then Rosie is completely crackers into gymnastics, and they're so different. yet they're each amazing in their own ways, and they've given me purpose and joy and unconditional love. And my point is here, I have never been more wrong about something in my life. And even that made me go, wow. Considering how wrong I was, how many other things am I wrong about? Sat in that room, I was trying to predict the future and predict how it would feel and what would happen and the experiences I would have, and trying to predict the future and coming up with conclusions that seem negative. How often are we predicting the future? How often are we predicting that if I do this, I won't be happy, or if I do this, I will be happy, or if I do this, then this will go wrong, and that will go wrong, and this will go wrong, and this argument will happen, and this stress will occur? How often do we spend our time trying to predict the future and making assumptions about how we think we're going to feel, or the experience we think we're going to have, or the pressure that we think is going to put on us, or the amount of work that we think it's going to take in order to get there, or the certain habits or behaviors that we think we need in order to have what we think we want? It's nuts. So then I'm like, well, how many other things have I been wrong about? Going to uni, that was great, but I was wrong about what I thought I was going to come out the end of it with, having kids and starting business, and there's so many things. How many things have you bought? Like, I think I mentioned the car, where I thought honestly, on some level, I thought that having a car would make me feel successful, a nice car. And I thought that when I pulled up, everyone would be clapping and cheering, like, well done, James, you've made it, and everyone would be looking. And that doesn't happen. You just pull up in a car and no one even notices. Like, no one says anything, no one notices. It doesn't feel any different for the most part. And I took my mate's Aston Martin for a spin of my own once. And I was very surprised at how little people cared. You could chuck it in sport mode and absolutely rinse it, so it made such a noise. But even then, some people are looking at you thinking you're a complete and utter muppet, just this total bellend, rinsing down the high street at 20 mile an hour in second gear with sports mode. So you start to go, wow, like my thinking, I'm constantly trying to guess the future, predict how I'm going to feel, predict how I'm not going to feel, predict what will make me happy and unhappy, and what will make me feel successful and not successful, and what will make me feel fulfilled and not. And it all starts to point in the direction of how reliable is thinking really? How reliable is it? Like, anxiety to me is predicting the future with a negative outcome. Excitement to me is predicting the future with a positive outcome. There's a very fine line between the two. I predict I'm going to go outside naked and someone's going to beat me up. That's anxiety. I predict I'm going to go outside naked and everyone's going to cheer and clap and throw money at me because they think I'm a male stripper. Well, that might be excitement. There's a very fine line between the predictions. And as we've kind of alluded to or touched upon already, your thinking creates your feelings. But we think that the outside world is what creates our feelings. And seeing as our thinking isn't that reliable, and we're often wrong, it all starts to kind of shake the snow globe a little bit. Suddenly it's like your world is shook up, and maybe even from this conversation, there's some things to sit with here and wait for that kind of snow to settle, wait for the dust to settle and make sense of it. But once you know that, you start to go, wow, I'm living in the feeling of my thinking, not the feeling of my circumstances. I'm often wrong about my circumstances. I'm often wrong about so many of my predictions. So that kind of leaves us with something else. That kind of leaves us with the present moment. It kind of leaves us with tuning into the present moment, showing up fully alive to what's going on in our life right now, and also just having a bit of this kind of playful energy where you go, I don't know, I'm going to find out. I don't know what it's going to feel like to drive a Lamborghini, but I'm going to find out, Or maybe actually, based on this, now I know that it's not going to make me feel happiness or make me feel like Billy Big Balls or make me more attractive, or now I know that that's just an imagination. It's my imagination telling me what a prediction again. sometimes you'll find that certain desires drop away. Certain desires are like, oh, I'm not really that bothered now. Or others, you're like, I don't know, I just want to give it a go. You know, is anyone going to listen to this podcast? Is anyone going to like it? Is anyone going to think I'm talking any sense? An anxious or negative or pessimistic person would say, no one's going to listen, you're talking total dog shit, and you're wasting your time. And trust me, those thoughts will flow past, for me, for anyone. And then you might have moments of, actually, I've changed my mind. This podcast can be amazing. Everyone's going to listen. It's going to change the world. You know, and that's just a prediction with a positive outcome. But when you tune into this, you start to go, I don't fucking know. I don't know. But I feel like I want to do it. I seem to enjoy doing it. And I'm willing to find out. I'm willing to get in the game. I'm willing to fully play this game because I can't lose, because I haven't attached anything to the outcome, because I haven't attached my self-esteem or confidence or happiness to any of the outcome. It doesn't matter anyway. You can just show up, play full out, and enjoy it. So I know I've gone off on a few different kind of tangents there, and again, we're going to circle around this sort of stuff again and again in different ways, different scenarios, different conversations, different metaphors. But what I really wanted to point to today is either a reminder of what you already know, and that is your thinking isn't always true, it isn't always that reliable, and often it can be disempowering. Or, if you've not come across this before, then this is going to get you to look at life from a slightly different perspective and maybe have your own insights from this conversation. And I'm sure there was a third point, but I can't remember, so that's good. But we are going to talk more about this because I don't want to villainize thinking. I don't want to villainize thoughts like we need to just stop them forever, because they're also the creative power that brings what you want into existence. They are also everything in your room right now, wherever you are, in the car or whatever. Everything that you see is usually man-made. It's come from someone's thinking into existence. Someone had to think about creating a microphone before, it didn't just grow on a tree. It didn't just appear out of the floor, or blueprints for a microphone didn't fall out of the sky. Someone had to get the inspired thought that maybe what we need is a device that somehow magnifies our voice or records it. And they've gone, wow, okay. And they've then lent into that thought and turned it into a reality. It's gone from formless into form. So our thinking is fantastic when we use it the right way. But when it's not being used in the right way, or it's being used against us, and it's this invisible force, it can be a gift or a curse, basically. It can be a gift or it can be a curse. And the more aware you are of it, the more aware you are, the more tuned into the thinking, and the more you see the nature of thought, the more you can start to disengage with the thinking that's not helpful and engage with the thinking that is. And in doing so, you're going to change the way that you are feeling. And in changing the way that you're feeling, you're going to change the actions that you're taking, and therefore your circumstances change. But they won't any longer being changed. You will no longer be changing your circumstances so that you can change the way you feel. You'll just be changing your circumstances as a result of the way you feel. Anyway, let's leave it there. Let's leave it there for now, and we'll dive into this more, and we'll dive into the differences between what to me is personal thinking and what is deeper thinking. What is thought created from ego and what is a deeper kind of intuition. We will look at how thought does create the world, and the little nuances in amongst this that means that you can start to question the thoughts, see the thoughts, be aware of the thoughts, and just bring more awareness to that, because ultimately that's kind of the first part of this, is really becoming aware. And then beyond that, we can start to look at, what do we do with this? How do we apply this? How do we use this to shape our life in some way? How do we use this to have a better business, or have a happier life, or feel more peaceful, or feel more inspired, or be more creative, or follow our dreams, or have a better relationship, or be a better parent, or, do something that we've thought about for years but not done. You know, how do we overcome fear? How do we be more confident? How do we be more resilient in times of stress? How do, you know, the list goes on. I could be here listing this for hours. So on that bombshell, again, I appreciate you being here. I'm enjoying this. I hope you are too. And I'll speak to you next time.